And today we are here with Reverend Bob Grabowski, well known for his global work for the Science of Mind and Centers for Spiritual Living. So Bob, let's get started with finding out about you and where you came from and kind of a little bit about your family and how you were introduced to Science of Mind. If you'd let us know about that.
The longer version is that my grandfather came over from Prussia on his wedding day to take a church in Pinckneyville, Illinois. He was a minister and several of my uncles were ministers. And our family departed from the very fundamental religion that the rest of the family was in, and I was raised in Christian Science, which was a fairly short punt for me to jump into religious science, which is a little more free thinking in my estimation.
Yes.
And my parents raised me in that and took me out of it when they couldn't handle the duality. They felt that we're all in this together, which is way more like religious science. And that's sort of where I came from in the beginning.
That's great. Did you have any siblings, or was it just your parents and you?
I had one sister.
Mm-hmm.
But she never had anything much to do with religion.
How did you find Science of Mind?
Well, after my parents took me out of Christian Science, I spent about 30 years unchurched, as we say, poking around here and there, trying to find out what it was that really fit the philosophy that I generated. And we moved up here to Sun Valley, Idaho, the week after a lady opened the doors of the Science of Mind church here. And we went the next weekend, and both Barbara and I felt like that old saying that you hear so much in this faith that it was like coming home. We knew that this was the place for us, and we were founding members of this church and have been for 30 years now.
It's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, and at some point I would like Barbara to stick her head in the camera also, so that we can say, hi Barbara, nice to meet you too. And Barbara also served on the Board of Trustees for the Church of Religious Science, or the United Church of Religious Science, for several years. Well, thank you, Barbara, for being here with Bob. So Bob, let's get back to you and your history with the Centers for Spiritual Living. And previously it was United Church of Religious Science, your participation was, and global. What did you do before you became part of the global ministries around the world?
Well, it was the global that got me really to go to ministerial school. I had gone through classwork here in this country, and I had no intention of becoming a practitioner or a minister. I was a reasonably successful jeweler, custom jeweler, and I had no intention of changing. It's just that I kept taking the courses, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I was in practitioner courses. And then, just before I became a practitioner, back in the early
yeah, right.
early 90s,
Yes.
I read an article in the Science of Mind magazine by a lady that had established a work over in Russia. And for some reason, I had no background in Russian or whatever, but it just really struck me. And so the next convention, I searched her out and talked with her. And the next year, I went over to Russia with a group of 30 practitioners and ministers. And we split into two groups. One went to St. Petersburg, and the other went to Naberezhny Chelny. And I went to St. Petersburg, and it changed my whole life. The format of that particular conference, and people came from 8 time zones away to spend 2 weeks with us teaching a introductory level of science of mind philosophy. And it was 2 weeks of their time that they all committed to, some from far away, some from local and whatnot. And at the end of the 2 weeks, we had broken into small groups, and I had a small group of like 15 people. And when at the end of the 2 weeks, we had a kind of a graduation ceremony where we presented each of them with a little certificate that thanked them for completing the course. And this one little old babushka in my group, who I had never gotten to say a single word unless I just dragged it out of her, she stopped halfway across the stage to pick up her certificate and said to my translator, "I don't know whether I want to accept this unless he promises to come and teach the advanced course." And I came home and enrolled in ministerial school as soon as I got home.
Mm-hmm.
She just changed my whole direction. And since then, I stopped doing jewelry design, and
Mm-hmm.
I just got my 20-year ministerial pin at the last conference.
Very nice. Very nice. Was that group led by Miriam Parrish Hall or Marlene Oaks?
No, this was Marlene Oaks.
Oh, okay. All right.
Marlene had a thing going with the Radio Russia, or Radio Moscow. There was only one radio station at the time, and so she had a lot of people knowing who she was, and that's how in that first conference that I went to, there were about 300 people in St. Petersburg and another 300 in Naberezhny Chelny.
That's just amazing, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
just amazing.
And
And what year was that? Was this
94, maybe?
94? So I don't know the years of history, but is that still USSR or is that Russia that you were in?
Oh, that was still USSR.
Okay, very good. So, so you continued then going over there, what, once a year or?
Pretty much, thanks to a lovely lady by the name of Shirley Morgan, who was our major contact. She was a stewardess who had the run from this country to Russia, and she was our contact for quite a while.
Yes.
And was able to provide me with buddy passes so that I could go regularly.
Great, that's wonderful. Do you have any special experiences that that you recall that this woman encouraging you to go into the school of ministry? And
well, I remember one other thing. In those days, we were Levi pants were good to take over, and one of our people over there could not get peanut butter, and so I would carry Levi's and peanut butter, that
Okay.
sort of thing. But one of the things from that first thing, the conference was over July 4th.
Hmm.
We had been asked to bring little American flags. And so we brought flags and gave them to all the Russians. And on July 4th, they wouldn't let us into the lecture hall in the morning. They said, no, 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 wait out here, wait out here. And so when they finally let us in, here were all these Russians waving little American flags and singing America the Beautiful. They couldn't handle the Star Spangled Banner, apparently, but it was one of the heartfelt things that kept me totally focused on being global.
Okay. So you went through a school of ministry, Holmes Institute, I guess it was called, or
Right. I started up in Seattle.
in Seattle.
And then went down and completed it at Agape in Santa Monica.
Okay, that was the Los Angeles office.
Right.
School. Okay. And did you ever have any kind of other ministry other than the global, basically going to Russia mostly? Was there any other part of your ministry that you had?
Well, I spent a couple months in Ukraine one time when
Barbara.
Yeah, Barbara and I had traveled in Russia a couple of times before she established the Ukrainian work that she had. And I went over with her a couple of times. And so she was on a passport that required her to be back here 6 months of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And so she asked me to come and spend 2 months in Ukraine handling what she had started there, which was a major thing in, gosh, I've blocked the name for the moment, where her major place was. And then we also had 3 other study groups down in Crimea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to go back and forth between those things, keeping things going for her for a couple of months.
Okay. So then when Nirvana Gale, he was the head of, can't remember his title at the time, but then he started the Global Ministries, and it wasn't called that at the moment either at that time. And then he turned it over to me to head that up, and we started expanding, and we met at your apartment in San Diego every so often. And that group, we really started expanding. We got people in South America and Mexico and all over the world. They were coming and participating in with us. And then a few years later, when I moved on, then you took over my position, and really appreciated that. So what happened then? What do you feel was the great things that happened then?
Well, at that point, we were called ERs, evangelical.
No, ecclesiastical representatives, yes.
Yeah, Nirvana, it was while he was the head of that they created the global one. They just added another segment. There were 6 that took place, including Canada and in the United States, and then the 7th one was me. I took over after you left, and that was where it started. And we had people in Australia and Costa Rica, Peru. Oh, a lot of things happening.
Right. Catherine Boskin was in Peru at that time, and we had practitioners that came to Asilomar. Do you recall that? And they came to Asilomar and for their oral panels, become practitioners. And it was really growing. There was a woman in Argentina, Jenny Hoff. Is that her last name? Goff. Jenny Goff was created a Spanish-speaking, was it once a month, teleconference kind of thing.
It was like what we had done with the Russians. We had a monthly conference call with the leaders, because at one point we had 9 different groups in Russia. And so when I went over, I would try to hit each of those. They were kind of on a line.
That's a few thousand miles apart, though, from what I understand.
Yeah, it was from Moscow. I was met in Moscow, and in the early days, I would do everything by train, but then I had this wonderful translator who was also a practitioner, and she and her husband would come with their car and pick me up in Moscow, and we would just make the trip over to the Ural Mountains, which was where the main place was.
That's great. Do you have any more thoughts about returning to Russia at all? When was the last time you were there?
About 4 years ago. I'm not doing as much traveling at the moment, and frankly, right now I don't know exactly what is left, because there's not anyone over there or anyone going over there to keep
in Russia. You're talking about
the forward motion.
Yes.
Barbara Leger is doing a wonderful job in Ukraine, keeping that going, even though she's here in this country 6 months of the year. But we don't have a Barbara Leger in Russia, unfortunately.
Yeah. But there are a few, as far as we know, there are still some Russian practitioners or ministers there who have groups. Isn't that right?
Yeah, in the 10 years that I went over there virtually every year, we paneled, I believe it was 99 practitioners.
Wow.
In the various places. And one of the most active was in, Kazan. And Kazan is a town that is largely Muslim, but we had a huge, very active group, and it's probably the most active that we have going right now. Anyway.
Do you know that it's still going now?
I believe so, yes.
And who is heading that up? Do you remember?
I'm sorry, I don't have that lady's name. I've stayed in her home, but a new lady took over for the one that started the Kazan group, and I don't have her name.
Okay. A couple of other Americans that went over there and lived. One was Ron Rude, I believe was his name, and another one was Travis.
Yeah, Travis was down in Sochi, down on the Black Sea, where the Olympics were, the Winter Olympics were a few years back. And then Ron Rude was up in near the Ural Mountains. And he was the one that really, he was a minister. Travis was not. He was a layperson, and but he did great work down there. And Barbara Leger and I traveled down to Sochi and did seminars and things, conferences. But Ron Rude was really the Papa San, because he lived there and did nothing but teach. and run the show. And this was in Ijevsk.
Oh, Egypt. Okay. All right. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to share with us about your history or your ministry or anything else? What do you think about the growth of Centers for Spiritual Living around the world and Science of Mind per se, and how that message is getting out there?
Well, one of the things, I think you probably have seen the CD that was produced by the lady that runs the most successful group in Lima, Peru. Have you seen that?
It was at the convention. I saw it. Yes.
Yeah, she put out this thing, and she was really a go-getter. And I went down there a couple of times, and she's an amazing lady. What she's doing, she has.
That's not Rebecca Pena. It was Rebecca Pena's video that I saw, and I would like to see the lady from Lima, Peru. I'd like to see that one. So.
Yeah, Rebecca, at the time that Ron Rood went over there and started it, we had three particular people that the global outreach supported. One was Rebecca in Mexico City.
Mm-hmm.
One was Ron Rood in Ijevsk. And the third one was Stephanie Clark, who was in South Africa.
Right.
And we went down and paneled her, three of her practitioners when she left. And one of them has since become a minister himself. And he still runs the show in South Africa, Gerd Ponto.
Oh, yes. Gerd, I know him. Mm-hmm.
Gerd is a wonderful person, and he should be getting ordained very, very soon.
I think he is. Does he still have both Johannesburg and what was
Cape
the other? And what?
Cape Town.
Cape Town. Does he still work with both of those groups?
I believe so.
Wow.
I haven't talked to him lately about Cape Town because that's a couple-hour flight, and it was. He had somebody down there that would keep things going while he wasn't there. But the global work really requires people in place.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course it does. Sure. Just as regular churches and centers in the U.S. does too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would offer the information that the people who are attracted to Science of Mind are some of the most wonderful people that you could ever meet or interact with. And for anyone who is looking for something to do outside the United States, there is an unlimited amount of opportunity to share and to be abroad. What we need to do is just see if we can't get some funding to send people over there. So anyway, it's been a fantastic experience for me, and it was exactly what sent me into the ministry, was to be active abroad, and it worked out that way.
Thank you very much for taking your time to be with us, and I know the people that watch this interview will be very encouraged to participate in global ministries. Thank you, Bob.
Wonderful.